Hey everybody, this is Nobody's Listening.
Today we have a very special episode for you. Something we've never technically done before.
Yeah, that's right. We're actually
Broadcasting to you live from a car.
yeah, that's right. We actually did a legitimate interview with WGN Chicago's multiple Emmy award-winning newscaster Larry Potash.
4-time winner for Best Anchor, if
Yeah.
I might add.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've heard our previous episode where we watched the Char Margolis viral video, fuck, I fucked it up. I lost it.
I think we're just going to have to leave that in.
Okay. Anyways,
Char Margolis, yeah.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
watched on our podcast, we watched the clip of Char Margolis, who came on the morning show with Larry and the crew.
Mm-hmm.
And she failed horribly.
Yeah, she utterly failed to be a psychic on live TV, and we were impressed with how Larry called her out on it, telling her that she failed miserably. So after that, we developed a lot of respect for him, and we watched a bunch of other videos of WGN Chicago and the crew, and found they're actually like really funny and edgy and original. And so we managed to get a phone interview set up with Larry.
Yeah, I just sent him a Facebook message, and he literally the next day sent me a message back and said, "Hey, yeah, whenever you let me know when you want to do it. Here's my phone number."
Yeah, exactly. So we were supposed to get into an actual legitimate studio so that we could have a phone line set up and actually do a legitimate phone interview and have it recorded professionally. But when we got there, the guy who was supposed to let us in was nowhere to be found. So we kind of had to do a plan B, and we ended up recording this interview in a parked car in the university parking lot on 2 iPhones.
Yeah. Well, no, mine's. I just want to correct you. I do not have an iPhone.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I don't want to make it a thing, but I don't have an iPhone. It's a Samsung Galaxy. All right.
Fair enough. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
So yeah, the quality of audio is not up to our usual standard, but I don't know. I think it gives the interview a certain amount of character. Just hunched over in Russ's car.
We straight
talking
up
to-
told Larry, so
Yeah,
he
exactly.
was very aware that we were sitting in my car in the parking lot
Yeah.
interviewing him. So
Exactly. All right. So yeah, enjoy.
we'll just jump right in. Jordan starts off by asking Larry about, or telling Larry about our situation.
Yeah. And then is that where we would cut into the interview? Okay. So that's where we. Okay, gotcha. We are interviewing you in a parked car in a university parking lot. So
That's all right.
yeah. So sorry, we feel a little cheesy talking to an actual professional holding up our iPhones. It's not quite how we wanted to do things, but we appreciate you agreeing to do this interview greatly. We've been huge fans of yours ever since we saw the clip of you interviewing Char Margolis, and thank you very much for being on our podcast. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically how we got into you. I guess you probably know that clip went a little viral, and I think it's a few years old. But we were very impressed with the bluntness with which you handled the psychic not really living up to her supposed skill set. And ever since then, we've been big fans of WGN.
Well, I appreciate that. We've actually had a number of psychics over the years, and normally, I think local news anchors and TV people in general just kind of let the psychics run, rush out on the whole thing, and because they don't understand the scam, and so they just sort of play along, thinking they're being a gracious host. And I think you can still be polite and call it for what it is. And I think in the context of a news show, you have a responsibility to do that. And I'm pretty familiar with how their scam works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I completely agree. You other, I would say, lesser shows would kind of just let her kind of go on, and they would avoid the conflict or any potential awkwardness. But we appreciate the way that you called her out. I think your exact words were failed miserably. So.
Yeah, she you know what, I think was she the one she was the one that she was so rattled she wanted to do a private consultation with me after the show with no cameras in the green room, and I agreed to do it, and she failed miserably again.
Yeah, that's right. I rewatched that clip this morning. Yeah, she wanted it done, I guess, again, on her own conditions with no cameras going. So
it gave her a quick chance to check out your bio on the website, so she had something to go off of.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she still failed miserably, and it's, I think there are some of these people out there who really do believe they have some kind of power. I'm not sure that she's one of them, and then there are others who are looking to make a buck. And so there are a few standing offers out there from different organizations who will pay $50,000 and more if you can prove under scientific conditions this power. And of course, they all fail, and the ones who are running a scam are smart enough to know they're not going to subject themselves to scientific conditions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think the James Randi Educational Foundation has one. I think he's still offering $1 million, and yeah, to this point, nobody has been successful. And one thing that struck me in that interview is she throws out the term spirit world, like she's in touch with the spirit world, and I mean, it's like you can't just throw out a term like that and then just have everyone accept it. Right? What exactly is the spirit world?
Well, that's the problem. So many people in our society do accept that as a factual thing, so they don't know enough to question it. The other trap that they use is if things aren't going well or they're meeting resistance, they'll say, "You're closed." What do you mean I'm closed? What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, that's right. You're perfectly open-minded. If something actually seems like it's legitimate, I'm sure, we would all believe in psychic powers if even one time they would actually be able to demonstrate, like, oh, that was exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking of an 18-digit number and you got it exactly. But you just don't really see that happening.
So, Larry, we're wondering, most morning shows, like you said, would kind of let the psychic go and let her do her thing and kind of BS everybody who's watching your show. You called her out. And in general, we found, through watching clips over the internet about your show, is that it's a little bit more edgy. You guys kind of seem to have a good time. Is there a lot of pushback from the program director, or do you guys pretty much get to do whatever you want at this point?
Well, no, they leave us alone, and they leave us alone because the ratings are great. And so, if the ratings were terrible, then maybe they would. But, it sort of started out of necessity in that we were the last morning show on the air 20 years ago, and so you have to do something different. You can't just sit under the clock at the card table and read the news headlines. And it just so happens that the people that they had assembled at some point, we just had similar chemistry. We had a similar sense of humor. And I would say that, what most people say, they either say, oh, you're the funny show. But a lot of people say you're the normal show because we just act like regular people and not caricatures of news anchor robots that is so prevalent in our industry.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's that kind of homogenous, type of morning show where they don't want anything awkward. They don't want anything that would be, conflict. But you guys just seem like you're just having a good time. You're acting, there's no affectation. And I think that the fact that a couple of guys who don't live in Chicago, who don't even live in the United States, and who live on the other side of the continent, are fans of your show, I think is a testament to how good you guys are.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's more awkward on the morning shows, which is essentially all of them, where everybody is deliriously happy 100% of the time. It's just who lives their life that way. And, we could be a little happier, I think, more often. But, if some segment sucks, we say, hey, boy, that really sucked. And I think people appreciate that.
Well, and as a podcast, we've been doing this for a little while now. And our actual tagline for our show is, it's not a podcast, it's a fucking conversation, right? So we kind of get the same feel from your morning show in that you guys are just real people telling everybody what's going on in the world around them.
Yeah, and that doesn't sound like a big deal, but as we've been saying here, it's so rare, because, everybody's doing this newscast from 1975 and it just hasn't evolved and everybody's worried that you're going to anger people at home. And we don't expect to get every single viewer out there. People who watch CNN are probably not going to watch us, but you need to get a bigger chunk of the pie as you can, and we get a good chunk of the pie. So here we still are, the core of the on-air team, just about 20 years later, still together.
So the next question I had for you is 4 Emmys for Best Anchor, and you're obviously a popular guy. Do you still get any hate mail? And if so, what's the best hate mail that you've ever received?
Yeah, for maybe people who just don't really get the tone of the show, they're kind of expecting that 1975 kind of stiff morning show.
Well, we do a voicemail segment where we actually play all the negative comments from those people, and surprisingly, some of those people are repeat callers, so they get angry about something, but they still watch the show. I don't know why. But we really don't get that much hate mail. I think there are enough channels out there. If you don't like the show, you go watch something else, and people will complain about something. But it doesn't bother, I think, any of us. It's just more fodder for good humor that we use in the show.
Exactly. Yeah, especially when you're number one. The occasional, person that doesn't really get the show, I'm sure it doesn't really bother you at all.
Yeah.
So another thing that we do here on our Nobody's Listening podcast is we like to discuss dreams. And what is a dream that has stuck with you that you can remember that you could share with our listeners?
It's so funny you bring that up because I was just in a meeting. We were talking about a segment and about questions, and this was one of the questions. I literally had this conversation about 5 minutes ago, and I just had this dream as a kid that I just remembered about shadows of cowboys on my bedroom wall, and my bed went flying through my basement in Boston, which, it's not like one of those finished man caves. This is what we call a cellar, a dirty, grimy, crappy cellar, floating on my bed, looking at wooden statuettes of Eastern European Jews that my grandmother had in her house. So there's a freaky combination of things that has just stuck with me for, 40 years.
Have you ever sat down with some kind of dream interpreter to try and figure out what that all means, or is it even worth it?
You know what? I have like 3 cousins who are psychologists, so I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to have to give them a call and see what that's all about.
Yeah. Unpack the symbolism in that one. That's hilarious. We also wanted to ask you, what made you want to get into broadcasting in the first place? Was there, did you have a hero, or was there some sort of initial inspiration?
Well, initially, for some reason, and I found that this is sort of a rare thing, but I really started thinking about what I wanted to do with my life when I was in the 7th or 8th grade. And I wanted to be a sportscaster because I was a jock, and I thought, hey, that's a great way to make a living. And I liked history, and I liked writing. And so I just thought, well, you know what, this would be a good profession. Then went to school for journalism school, and I covered, some local sporting events for the crappy little weekly newspaper. And, sports journalism it was very limiting, and I got into news and I really enjoyed it. And so that sort of was the start. I transitioned into news. My first interview actually was in 3rd grade. We had a 3rd grade newspaper. My friend's dad worked for the Boston Bruins, so we went over to Wayne Cashman's house, who was a legendary defenseman, and waiting for him to arrive. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 1976 or so, and he walks in with plaid pants, white leather shoes, and a white shirt, hammered out of his mind. And he starts chasing me around the pool, and I'm 7 years old or 8 years old, and I jump in the pool to get away from this guy and end up chipping my teeth and having to go home and missing the interview. And my friend's dad explaining that Mr. Cashman was on some medications for an injury, which now I know that he was just shit-faced.
Yeah.
That's so funny. So you started there with your broadcasting career. You've also worked in Texas. You've worked in Oklahoma. And now you're based in Chicago. How does Chicago compare to the rest of the states?
Well, you're trying to work your way into the biggest market. You're not necessarily the biggest market, but you're trying to work into a big market, a top 10 market. So, that's where the exposure is. That's, hopefully you can make a better living in Chicago than you can in Tulsa. Having said that, I know some extremely talented people who, are from the South or the West, and they want to live in Tulsa, and they live there, and they do great work there. And in some ways, in Tulsa, I would spend all day covering a murder story, which was interesting to journalistically to kind of dig up facts and run around town and get all the elements. Where in Chicago, in a big city, it's run and gun, rip and read. There's so much going on and there's so much traffic. It's a lot of quantity over quality. Not all the time, but that I think is a challenge of the bigger market. But believe me, I'd much rather be anchoring in Chicago than reporting in Tulsa, making $28,000 a year.
So Chicago and Vancouver have a little bit of a history in recent times. We have had our hats handed to us by your hockey team on multiple occasions, and we're just wondering if that rivalry means anything to the city of Chicago, or if it's just us bitter because we have never managed to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not really a big hockey fan. I don't know much about it, but I can honestly tell you, I have never heard anybody say a peep about Vancouver.
Okay.
Other than it's a nice place to visit, and I've always wanted to visit there. But so this might be one of those similar to the Boston Yankees rivalry, where people in Boston hate the Yankees, and the people in New York, they really don't think much about any of it.
Yeah.
Larry, that only makes it worse. That makes me hate Chicago all the more.
Yeah, we kind of destroyed Vancouver in a little fit of losing tantrum after the Stanley Cup Finals, and then to find out Chicago is kind of indifferent. Or not completely different, but yeah, that's fine.
So just a couple more questions for you, Larry. The one thing that we hold true to our heart, as we are from British Columbia, is the fact that in the States now, Colorado and Washington State have legalized marijuana. And that is a big thing here in Canada because everybody in this country does it, and whether they're willing to admit it or not. And we're just surprised that the states, who generally don't make policies as quickly as Canada does, have now moved further in that kind of social realm than we have. Now, what's the general feeling around Chicago, where that state has not legalized it yet? Is there a feeling that there's some kind of momentum in changing that paradigm for the United States?
In Illinois, the big problem is pension reform, which is incredibly boring, so I won't bore you about it. So I don't know that marijuana has been a huge issue here as it has been in other places. And you have to remember, Illinois is two very different places. You have Chicago, and then you have the rest of the state. And downstate, it's a completely different place. So these dynamics get all played out in the legislature. And as a journalist, I really don't give my opinion on news topics such as this one way or the other than to say that it's I'm sure it's one of the many issues down there being kicked around. But right now they're just trying to figure out how not to go bankrupt.
Right. Okay. I see. Yeah, and pension reform, like you said, is kind of has the spotlight there. So we just have one more question for you, if that's all right. What was your most what would you say is your most satisfying moment as a broadcaster?
Well, it's interesting. The first month I started working here, I had the opportunity to do this investigative report with hidden camera. A girl had been assaulted in a children's hospital, so we went in with the hidden camera to test security. This photographer and I could only do this because nobody knew who I was. I just started working here. And so if I had to come up with a checklist of the 50 things that I could try and get that would demonstrate how bad security is, I got all 50 of them. And I thought for sure after this that they would catch me in 5 minutes and kick me out. I was in there for 2.5 hours and ultimately begging to be caught. To the point where I was walking up to doctors and saying, "Hey, where do you keep the kids at?" And everything I could have asked for. People in security explaining what they're doing and what they're shooting. I walked into rooms that had dangerous chemicals in them. I actually, with the camera, my photographer and I stood over a crib with a newborn infant and just stood there. And, I looked like a professional. I had a shirt and tie on, but my photographer looked like a child molester. I mean, he was this heavy guy with overalls and a beard and a ponytail and these goofy glasses. I mean, it was unbelievable what we got away with in this hospital. You never could get away with it today. But doing things like that, I find very satisfying, and I get more of a charge out of doing an investigative report or even a good feature that hopefully enlightens people about something they didn't know than anchoring or being on TV or having somebody recognize you walk down the street.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that'd be immensely satisfying just to expose the security flaws of that place. And wow, that's incredible. Oh man.
Well, Larry, we really appreciate the time you spent with us today. We'd love to have you on the show again sometime, and keep on doing all the good work. We love watching you, and we're big fans. So thank you very much for coming on today and spending time with us.
No, I'm happy to do it, and keep in touch, and I appreciate the interest.
Yeah, no problem at all. I just found out that you can actually watch the WGN live stream this morning. So I was watching some of that this morning. So that's great. And thank you for being our first legitimate interview. You're the first person we've interviewed who's not someone we already knew personally. And thank you for being willing to put up with us interviewing you on iPhones in a parked car. We appreciate it hugely, and we wish you all the best and your entire
That's
team.
all right. The lesson is you guys made it happen despite the problems, and that happens all the time, even in Chicago. So good job, and keep in touch. Thanks, guys.